Three, two. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore, where we are starting out our new themed month of Audience Appreciation April. Mm-hmm. So, where we have gone and pooled some filmed votes from several different groups. And this is the second film that we are talking about from this group. So let's go over to Jake here, and why don't we have him tell us about our film suggestion for tonight?
Okay, so thanks to the fine folks at Talk Movies with us who suggested our wonderful and very lively discussion that we just had for Whiplash. They also suggested an obscure little indie from 1994 that you may have heard of. IMDb describes the lives of two mob hitmen, a boxer, a gangster and his wife, and a pair of diner bandits intertwine in four tales of violence and redemption. This, of course, is the film written by Quentin Tarantino, his sophomore film, 1994's Pulp Fiction, which actually we are talking some top-rated films tonight per IMDb. With currently number 45 on their list, and Pulp Fiction is number 8. So these are some very popular films. Pulp Fiction actually was based in part on stories by Roger Avery. And from what I understand, he and Tarantino had a bit of a falling out over the way Tarantino got full credit for this one. But it does have Tarantino's signature all over it. So, you can't fault it so much for that. But as I said, Pulp Fiction's basically, it was his follow-up to Reservoir Dogs, and it is a very colorful film with very colorful characters and a very colorful soundtrack, and just generally
language.
Very colorful language, yes.
Well, dude, just an equally appropriate IMDb synopsis would have just been awesome dialogue, the movie.
Indeed.
I kind of wish that the description had just said Royale with cheese and that was it.
Exactly. But at any rate, and we kind of touched a little bit on the quotability of Whiplash, but Pulp Fiction kind of blows it out of the water. It is one of the most
it blows it out of the ocean. It's not even on the same fucking planet.
Oh.
It's
not even the same sport as Jules would say.
Seriously,
well, actually,
there was a time when I could recite like pretty much the whole movie back to back, and I'm pretty rusty now. But
there was a time. I think it may have been American Film Institute. I can't remember exactly. There were a couple lists that came out where they were like the greatest screenplays of all time and the most overrated screenplays of all time. And I remember Pulp Fiction and Casablanca both were like in the top 5 of both lists.
Fair.
That's I found that kind of amusing, but it's kind of true.
1,000% fair.
It is. Well, whenever something is that beloved and that foundational for the rest of screenwriting as a craft and filmmaking, inevitably you're going to have that crowd that's like, oh, it's overrated. So I can totally understand it both perspectives.
Pulp Fiction is so fucking quotable. It almost feels like parody of itself now when you watch it, where it's like they're just setting us up to repeat the lines because they're so funny.
I mean, so I had the line in my on my AOL Instant Messenger the longest time. When somebody would chat with me, would open up with Sam Jackson's line about speaking English appropriately.
Right. English. Actually, there was. I meant to bring this up in the Whiplash conversation, but there were a couple of parts where I was kind of thinking to myself, I could hear Fletcher saying, "English, motherfucker."
Yeah, seriously.
But at any rate,
the impossible question will be, of course, at the very end of this discussion, which is favorite scene slash moment slash line, especially quote. It's like, oh shit, what am I gonna pick? I don't know.
I actually have a clear one on this one, but there are so many good ones. But anyway, I'm going to start with you, Mo. What was your first impression, first experience with this film? Was this your first time at a bat with this one?
Oh, hell no, dude. I mean, this is one of those movies that, there was probably like that cringy time when I was like 17 where I would have thought that this defined my film fandom or something. Like, me and my buddy were super obsessed with Quentin Tarantino films and like Wes Anderson to a point later on, and it just I love Tarantino to death, but I fully think that he's that filmmaker that you're absolutely obsessed with at a certain period in your film development, and then you still look back fondly on all those, because I still fucking love Reservoir Dogs. I love this, Kill Bill, all that shit is like awesome. They're the types of movies I wish I was responsible for, because they call to so much shit that you guys well know I love, But Pulp Fiction, like I mentioned just a moment earlier, it's kind of gotten to that point for me where it almost feels like self-parody when I watch it now, because it's so quotable and iconic and like all that stuff that it feels like it is just setting you up for that shit. And I think that's something in Tarantino's intent with it, like it's formulated to be a certain way. It's still an awesome disjointed, what's the word? Like collage of a movie.
I think the phrase that you're referring to, where it's kind of a parody of itself, I think that's called self-reflexivity, which is a term that I've heard used to describe the film.
Well, there you go. That's a few more syllables than I can afford in my round, but I understand what you're saying there. It's it really is that, and at the same time, kind of like I said, just an awesome, glorious sort of collage of a movie. It very much lives up to its title of being Pulp Fiction, where you get little snippets of stories from different crazy walks of life, but sometimes I'd argue he almost went against the nature of true Pulp Fiction back in the day, which is that they all have a connecting element that came more later. But it's fair enough. He's doing like the retro throwback shit with that. I will go on record as saying I think that the series 100 Bullets from Vertigo borrowed a bit of the idea of Pulp Fiction and sort of added a maybe supernatural element to it, or just a deeper element to it, and made an entire fucking comic book series out of it. But it's obviously influential in its own ways. It's obviously awesome in several different ways, and it still manages to be one of the best movies ever to listen to. There's lots of it that is fun to watch as well. I mean, the whole thing is fun to watch, but Pulp Fiction is one of those only movies I can think of, like off the top of my head, that I know is good to just put on as background noise and just listen to the dialogue. And it's just as enjoyable as actually watching the movie. So that's always been my takeaway, in adult life from Pulp Fiction.
That's kind of Tarantino's, I'd say for almost all of his movies, not all of them, but for a grand majority of them, I think he and filmmakers of his generation, but him especially, they tended to really love what Tarantino himself called hangout movies, where you're able to hang out with the characters and they're like your friends and stuff. And Tarantino, and I think to a certain degree Kevin Smith also kind of took that and ran with it.
True enough.
And I think that I think this movie is most definitely, it has its hangout moments.
Well, but my point is the listenability of them. Like, Clerks is another one that you could take and you could just rip the entire audio track off of these movies and present it as like an old-timey radio show almost, and it would work. You could listen to the whole movie and enjoy it just as much as watching it.
I do have the official commercially released soundtracks for this one, Jackie Brown, and one of the Kill Bill movies. And they did include random bits of dialogue as audio tracks on those soundtracks.
This from Dusk Till Dawn one did that as well.
Yeah. Well, and of course, Dusk Till Dawn was Tarantino's buddy Rodriguez. He definitely is very much in that same mold in a lot of ways.
Rodriguez is in a lot of ways, though. He's actually kind of. It's funny that they're such good friends because in a lot of ways, Rodriguez is kind of the total opposite of Tarantino because Rodriguez is like all about like action,
bang in your fucking face, awesomeness, you know,
and not just that, but not just that, but also like his movies tend to be really tightly cut. They don't waste time. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of doing like a kids movie, which is kind of to his detriment in most cases.
Tell me you don't want to hang out and take. Tell me you don't want to hang out and take shots with El Mariachi. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, but it's not. It's nowhere near to the same. No. It's nowhere near to the same degree, though. I mean, Robert Rodriguez movies, they tend to move pretty fast, and they tend to be pretty no bullshit. You know, no frills. Which now keep in mind, you know, Tarantino at his best. You know, whenever he's able to maintain the tension or the interest in the way that he does here, in a way that he, unfortunately, I think seems to have lost in some of his more recent films. Like I'm thinking The Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Those movies hung out way too much and did not maintain their tension all that effectively. This or their interest level, because like there are plenty of moments in Pulp Fiction where there's not necessarily tension in like the thriller sense, but there's like I'm thinking of like the Jackrabbit Slims where like there's sexual tension, but there's not like, you know, that is a moment where the movie hangs out, but the interest level is still maintained because there is sexual tension. But you know, he was able to maintain that more effectively, I think, earlier in his career than he is now. But nonetheless, you're right that the listenability, if that's a word, of this film is in tip-top shape.
Right now, though, that sexual tension is real because even Dave's profile picture, I had that poster like on the back of my door for several years.
Oh yeah,
I never complained.
I think everybody else in college.
I think they did, Forrest. I think you're right. Like
you were able to make it
ones like that Guns N' Roses poster that everybody had. You know,
you were able to make it stick to the wall without tape. If you
I don't know. I never had that poster. I never had that poster, but I could see that you flip it around. You probably have Forrest's profile pic on the back. How about you, Forrest? What was your first impression with this one?
Okay, so first time I saw this movie, I was So my aunt had it on VHS. It was like one of those, but it was like kind of like one of those things that I would see in her movie collection, but it was like kind of like off limits. Just because I was so young at the time. But eventually I
down there with Natural Born Killers and shit.
Yeah, exactly. Or Interview with the Vampire. But I remember catching it. But I remember several years later, my older cousin and I were channel surfing and Pulp Fiction, and it was on TV. So we watched the whole thing. Like he had seen it, but I hadn't. I was 16 at the time. But I was definitely in the same boat as Mo, where I was immediately blown away. Thought it was the greatest thing ever. And I went through my whole Tarantino phase. Although in this case, I think I might have seen. No, I did see Kill Bill. I think I had already seen Kill Bill Volume 1 prior to seeing Pulp Fiction. But anyway, I went through. I definitely went through a Tarantino phase too. And I still think it was. Although I would say, I'm still. Although looking back, I still think Pulp Fiction should have won Best Picture over Forrest Gump.
Yeah,
I agree. But I mean, dude, totally. You go through like I don't know if it's a generational thing, but you go through like your Tarantino phase, your David Lynch phase, and then I guess like
I think
supplement
it's a
whatever
I
other.
I kind of feel like
Kubrick.
Tarantino and Lynch phases are rites of passage for any
yes
cinephile.
If you're a fan of weird shit and like crazy cinema, then you go through those. You know, it's like when you transition from fucking thrash metal to death metal or whatever. It's.
I mean, I am generally. I think for my own style, I think I probably derived more from David Lynch, but that's not to say that Tarantino wasn't foundational in his own right.
Not at all. I mean, if I were to make a movie, it'd probably be equal parts Trauma, David Lynch, and Tarantino. You know?
Yeah, I've
really more John Waters or
I've really.
We're talking some weird movies now.
I know. Now I've really endeavored. Well, I've really endeavored in my own work to not, because like I know how seductive for filmmakers, I know how seductive wanting to be like Tarantino is, and so because his movies are so flashy and so kind of in your face, and obviously very learned in their cinematic, pedigree. Like he's seen a lot of movies, he knows his stuff. And so it's very tempting to want to copy that. But what happened after this movie came out? Waves and waves of Tarantino imitators. And so for me, I've really endeavored not to kind of go out of my way not to copy Tarantino because of how seductive it is.
No, dude, if I ever make a movie, I'm stroking every vein of the nostalgia cock. Like, it's just going to happen the entire time, Like, and that's what I took from
Tarantino. Mo, is that the title of your movie?
Let's do it.
Can I please steal that line, please?
Yeah, you're welcome to it.
Thank you. That's too good.
What's up?
Did we get through every first impression?
No, we haven't. Did you finish, Forrest?
I think I feel like that's kind of all I can really contribute about this.
Okay.
Great movie, but it's definitely a movie where it's the greatest thing ever at a certain age.
Well, you mentioned seeing it on TV, and I would honestly be remiss to pass up the opportunity here to mention that Pulp Fiction is one of the best TV cuts ever, because there's not a ton in the movie that really has to be excised.
Yeah. Actually, I caught it on premium. I caught it on premium cable.
I'm talking even back in the day, dude, when they used to play this shit on network TV. Yeah, they would edit some swear words, but a vast amount of the dialogue outside of Samuel L. Jackson shit is passable.
Good deal.
Like the wolf scene is basically intact.
Have you seen? I have not watched this on TV, like on edited TV.
Right.
I have not watched this on edited TV because I eventually got to a point where I was like, I refuse to watch movies for the first time.
I love a good TV cut,
Well, but
editing commercials, yeah, I get it.
Okay.
But what I will say, I have seen a clip of the scene where they first meet Jimmy, aka Quentin Tarantino himself. Yeah. I've seen the TV cut of that scene. It's hilarious because it's like, when you kept pulling in here, did you see a sign on the front of my house that said "Dead African American Storage"?
Yes, I love it, dude. It's amazing. Like the way they used to do that back in the day was so great.
Because it ain't there, because store dead African Americans ain't my Rudy too.
It makes the TV edits hilarious,
So Dane, was that your first experience with it, or what's your?
No, thankfully. Okay, I have got the weirdest first experience of anybody here. So this would have been back in the I started off this way. I don't think I finished the whole movie this way because I realized it was wrong, and so I went back and I found it cut together the correct way because I didn't know any better. I was just a dumb.
You watched the chronological cut?
Yes. So here's what happened. This was in the relatively early days of YouTube, where I would watch a lot of movies that were uploaded in parts, and I would do that for a lot of movies I'd never seen before, because again, early days of YouTube, the studios were not as stringent back then as they are now. Google wasn't as stringent as it is now. I don't even think Google owned them at that time. But so I was like in high school, and it was kind of my way to get around the parental barriers as far as like what I could and couldn't watch, that sort of stuff. I found when you grow up with authoritarian parents, you kind of learn those little workarounds. And so I did that, and I started to watch Pulp Fiction. It said Pulp Fiction in order, and that was the title of it. And I thought, oh, okay, so it's got the whole movie. Which now it didn't break it as much. It didn't break it as much as you would think it would. Interestingly enough, but I eventually discovered that, and I was like, wait, this isn't right. So I went back and I watched the one in its intended order, and I had pretty much the exact same experience with it. So it didn't really affect me all that much. But I saw that around high school age, and this is when I was first dipping my toes into screenwriting with like Celtics, and I was reading screenwriting books, and I was really wanting to learn it. It is still probably the part of the filmmaking process that I enjoy the most. And it's one of those foundational movies for screenwriting and for movie making in general.
Definitely, like this and Clerks are probably the most guilty of being responsible for like subsequent, super wordy, independent.
Yeah,
films,
absolutely.
Well, you buy the script for both movies at Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, well, but what I'll say is that this movie kind of broke every rule at the time when it came to like how to structure a film, how to because this thing is not really structured like a film. It's structured like a novel.
Yeah, more like a pulp magazine, really.
Yeah, well, but Tarantino's other films are very. It's weird because he's such a cinephile, and yet on the screenplay level, with a few exceptions, on the screenplay level, his films tend to be structured more like novels, which I think is really interesting. And I still think that's one of his strongest. It's not that he's going out of order just for its own sake. It's that, this is the way that it makes sense to tell this story in his brain.
Well, and much of that, I mean, again, I've never really like researched, the backstory to this, but being a fan of Pulp Fiction, like the actual, sort of, it's not even a subgenre, it's just a way of publishing
media.
What you got to do really with Pulp Fiction is look at it less like a film and more like a magazine.
Yeah,
that you would have got back in the day that had like, it would have been like several different like sports something or whatever, like mobster shit. Like it would have been one of those types of things back in the true crime, yada yada. That stuff very much had that disjointed. You get little pieces of these people's stories every so often, and depending on what they thought of the stories individually, they might publish them out of order too. And honestly, I think that's pretty genius that they sort of did that with us,
Well, but what's so interesting about the script of Pulp Fiction, which it's a script that I have gone back to whenever I've wanted to like look at how a screenwriter would format a certain thing or how to convey an idea on the page, that sort of stuff. It's a good one to go back to when you actually read it. What's interesting about the script of Pulp Fiction is that unlike any other script on earth, it actually has a table of contents. And which is true, it does. And that is so not typical screenwriting structure at all. So it's like this thing breaks a lot of rules, and yet it also, pays a lot of homage to crime films, to blaxploitation, to Pulp Fiction novels, to all manners of cinema.
But it's one of his least nostalgic centered films. I think that's why Pulp Fiction is one of those ones that endures so well. Because even something like Reservoir Dogs, I mean, he's just doing what other sort of movies like that. He's doing his nostalgic take on it. Kill Bill is just rife with that.
He really from Kill Bill onward, he really dove headfirst into the nostalgia pool. But what's nice about this film though is that it there's
I'd argue he was in it from the beginning, man. But
I know he was.
With this one, he managed to purify it. You know what I mean? Like this movie doesn't feel like it's just an homage to other things. It feels like it's fucking Pulp Fiction,
Well, but that's what I mean. That's what I mean is like I agree with you. I think he was always had one foot in the nostalgia pool, but I'm saying like from Kill Bill onward, he dove in head first and hasn't really necessarily come out since. Whereas with this film, you've got a ton of homages to stuff from the 70s particularly, but also like from the 60s, from the 50s.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of homages there, but they're also using cell phones, and it does feel of its time. It's got that right blend there, but it's
back
just,
in those days where he was still like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But then later on, you got to where it was like, you remember Mako Kaji? Lucy Liu, you know?
Well, that, or like, you know, where Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is pretty much all homage, all reference, and very little story. And
that one I think is overrated in my opinion.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah, looking forward to eventually watching it, but I don't have huge hopes for it.
It's a good one, but
I think with this film, like I agree with the sentiment that it is very foundational for anybody's film appreciation, career, but also like especially for learning the art of screenwriting, it's foundational. And especially like when you're a teenager to early 20s, this movie in particular, and Tarantino in general, they really speak to you.
Oh, yeah. It's the greatest thing in the world. Like
at that age, it definitely is. Well, it's something that, again, I spoke about the seductive power of it all. It's something that I try to kind of deliberately stay away from, because it's such a distinct and often imitated, never duplicated style, that it's like, I cannot do that. I need to do something that's special for me, even though it is something that clearly works for the guy. But it's like, I have to do something that's distinct for me. And I'm trying to find that I am finding that voice, what that is and what matters to me. But it's always good. Every film person has to make their trek through kind of like the Yellow Brick Road. You have to make your trek through Tarantino land in order to get to Oz, so that's one of the stops on the way.
When you first hit that nostalgic period, when you're like an older film fan, so you hit up all those old Spielberg movies, and then you kind of realize as an older film fan, like, holy shit, this dude has like other movies he did too.
Right.
And then you watch all those and you're like, magnificent, and then you move on to other shit. But it really isn't like that pivotal of a moment.
I will say right off the bat though that one of the things, having revisited all of Tarantino land pretty much not too long ago, one thing that I think you could definitely say to his work is that almost all of it, much more style over substance and much more homage over originality. Granted, the style is unbelievably distinct, and the homages are very thorough and very loving.
You know what the thing is, though, is that he's still loved for that shit, but Roth Zombie gets shit on for exactly the same thing.
Let me interject here. We've been doing a Tarantino love fest for about 8 minutes now, and we're still not through our first impressions. So, Dane, if you have any more, I was thinking you were kind of doing that, but if you have more, then Dave, we'll let you go.
This was not my first first time seeing the film. I love Samuel Jackson, and I also like John Travolta as an actor. And one thing I think, especially like as he was like a star, because I think he's hit or miss now, but especially when he did this film. I mean, obviously he started out in dance. He did a little dance number with but to me, he's always kind of been like a pretty boy greaser.
A little dance number. You talking about Saturday Night Motherfucking Fever, dude? Give it a proper credit.
A little dance number there.
That is one of the best movies of all time.
Seriously.
Watch the hair.
Regardless, he does make.
We gotta watch that movie.
He does make a pretty sleazy hitman. You know, I mean, he's like that. He's like that sidekick in here.
Dude,
So,
and he's got that like ponytail that always has the loose tendrils hanging out the side, which just screams heroin addict. I don't know why. You know.
Okay.
Not quite Swordfish, but definitely there. But
another high-rated film.
But this was among one of Samuel L. Jackson's "Don't Mess with Me, Motherfucker" kind of a movies. So this was where he actually had dialogue and could hold a conversation and made it entertaining because he walked into that fucking apartment room and was like, "Can't I just have a conversation with you?" You know.
Well, I think Jake said it best. This is where he became Samuel L. motherfucking Jackson.
The exact scene that you see in my icon there.
I think Samuel L. Jackson probably owns the trademark on the word "motherfucker" by now.
Right.
But I enjoy this movie because it's kind of like an interesting animal. It's like that moment of men's lives that you don't necessarily see, you know, and the interesting conversations that they have, and the interesting lives in which they present themselves.
Good. Sorry.
And it goes into some interesting avenues of underground society. So it's like what in one case you think you're just leading the hitman's life, and then suddenly you step yourself into a whole nother level of nastiness, you know.
The whole idea of this film going in, according to Tarantino, was to do two things. One, it was meant to show some of the classic, as he put them, chestnuts of the crime, / gangster stories, and see how they hold up in the real world. But also, it was meant to kind of show what hitmen do in their off time and what else they might be doing that's unrelated to those kind of more conventional plot elements.
I think okay, who still has a first impression to give?
We're still about halfway through first impressions.
Go for it. I'll bring this back around later.
Okay. So, Dave, did you have more to add on that?
I relatively enjoyed the film. I mean, I love returning to Quentin Tarantino films. They're delightfully, slowly, and painfully enjoyable. So
that's such a backhanded compliment.
I just enjoy how much he loved to play things out. You know,
right?
I mean, he plays things out extremely much longer than they need to be, but it's done such elegantly, and maybe there's some over the topness that you kind of expect from him, but you know, it is what it is, and
it's so slowly and painfully enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it.
It's all right.
It's like a slow roasted chicken.
Nice.
Slightly well done.
Nice. Okay. How about you, Brian?
Well, this is not my first time seeing this. Surprise, surprise. I actually believe that you were the person that showed me this film first, or at least informed me of it. I cannot remember. I was not much of a cinephile when I first met Jake in college. I was more of a comic book person then, and video games. So comic books and video games. That was about all I really had time for at the thing. And anime. I was getting into anime. But not a ton at the time. and I swear it was either you or somebody, but I remember they were showing Pulp Fiction either on campus or near campus. It might even have been shown at that place that they would show the movies now and again. You remember what I was talking about?
Are you talking about like in Massengill?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they might have done that. But correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't that image of Mia Wallace that Dave has there? Wasn't that posted on the back of a ton of comics in the 90s? Am I remembering that correctly?
Everywhere when I was just everywhere, and that to me, I know I saw it with a bunch of people the first time I saw it, and it was a fun experience. I wasn't as enamored as everybody had told me that I should be with the film at the time. It doesn't mean I don't like the film. I don't get that impression, but I was told by many that it was one of the greatest films ever made, that it was best drama, comedy, and action film all in one. And I'm just so I get talked up so much. I was expecting a heck of a lot more than what I got. And after sitting there, and I've watched it many times since then, I to this day still find it a very solid film, a very enjoyable one, and a good one to follow up a film like, say, Whiplash.
Right.
Because it has a much brighter. It's not nearly.
It's just more
it has
fun.
dark moments. It has dark moments, but it is mostly fun, and even the dark moments you can kind of laugh at in many cases. So I don't. I consider this a really good film, very solid film. I would have to watch this one and Forrest Gump back to back before I would say which one I preferred as the best film out of the two. But again, that's more my personal opinion on it.
The Coen brothers, that's the big three right there.
Well, that year,
directors that you like when you think you're really cool for when you're like at that age where you're like, I don't know, 17 through 21, where you're like, I'm super fucking cool because of like Tarantino.
I'll be
Tarantino, fucking the Coen brothers. Good.
I'll be the unpopular guy here and say that I think Forrest Gump did deserve the Best Picture Oscar. It did leave more of a impact on me and my style and what I try to put into my work in terms of like thematic resonance and depth and that kind of stuff. Because as much as I adore this film, I think the most meaningful story out of all of them is probably Jules' story. Just in terms of like what all is going to, But again, we'll get there.
Well, we'll get there pretty soon.
That fucking David Lynch, the Coen brothers, and Tarantino. That's the holy trinity of like I was a fucking college douchebag. I was
doing cinephile.
I thought that I like films. You know what I mean?
Kevin Smith. That's actually a pretty good.
Calling them movies.
That's actually a pretty good segue into mine, although unfortunately I'm going to kind of put that on hold just for a minute because Brandon brought up a good point. One day, I don't know if this will happen, but I'd love to just sit down, take a day, sit down with Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, Shawshank Redemption, and Maverick. Find out once and for all what the best film of that year was.
I'm gonna have to lean Shawshank, man, if I really had to pick between them.
Unfortunately, the Coens would not win that year because that was Hudsucker Proxy, which was a good movie, but not on the same level as the others. But anyway, no. But so what you guys were saying, my introduction to Pulp Fiction, I honestly have no clear memory about whether I got Brandon into it or not. I remember being introduced to it by the same people who introduced me to the Coen brothers, to Kevin Smith, a bunch of those. I think David Lynch came a little later for me. I actually think my introduction
I
to
subbed
Lynch
him in there, but you're definitely right. Like Kevin Smith.
My introduction to
Tarantino
Lynch
and those-
might have been when I went to go see Mulholland Drive. That might have been.
That comes later. That's when you're like
Yeah,
17, 18. You feel like you've outgrown like Kevin Smith and Tarantino, and you want to do
I was
something weird.
I was much older than that with any of these. I was a freshman in college.
Point being,
I
like
actually
that's
saw-
in that stage where you're
I-
like,
I
I
saw
want to
Lost-
be weird for a bit. You know what I mean? So
I saw Lost
wanna be
Highway
like-
before this.
Actually,
I saw Lost Highway before this. I saw it when I was like
later
15.
too.
the one that kind of got the ball rolling for me as far as independent cinema that might be considered more mature or whatever was in high school. I was a pretty big fan of Christina Ricci on account of Addams Family. And I think the film that really got the ball rolling for me was The Opposite of Sex. That would actually be an interesting one.
We had different high school experiences, bro.
Yes,
I remember my girlfriend giving me a bunch of hallucinogenic drugs, and then we watched Eraserhead. So that's fucking.
Yes, that definitely was not. That was not my high school. Yeah,
that tells us a lot.
So anyway,
right there.
I do remember very clearly with freshman year, I do remember being introduced to this movie, loving it. I remember very distinctly one person that did not care for it, and that disappointed me because I was kind of had a crush at the time. But it was
Brandon.
No, someone else entirely.
Yeah, it's
but actually, I think this was. I think that might have actually been before Pulp Fiction might have been one of the first ones I was introduced to, because I think this was early my freshman year. But whatever the case, I was blown away because it was totally unlike anything I had ever seen. It really was. It was, for me, a very different and unique movie. And of course, like I said, flat on its heels or right in that ballpark, I was introduced to Kevin Smith. I think the first Kevin Smith movie was probably Dogma, because that was in theaters at the time. You know, and then there was, you know, with the Coens, I was introduced by Raising Arizona. You know I saw Reservoir Dogs within a few months of Pulp Fiction. I don't recall if I saw Jackie Brown until after Kill Bill. I might have seen it before. I might have seen it after.
It was like a late high school sort of tack on to the thing. Definitely Tarantino is the only one of those guys I can say that I saw. Reservoir Dogs was a big deal for us because we were like horror kids, and somebody came to school and they were like, he cuts off his fucking ear. And
I do think that your point that you might be much more into it when you're younger is probably a very valid point. I do think that Tarantino has slipped a bit in his later films. The only film he's done that I just straight up had trouble enjoying, I really had trouble enjoying The Hateful Eight. I had trouble with that. And
I was so disappointed by that.
And I was disappointed with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, not because it wasn't enjoyable, but of all his films, including The Hateful Eight, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the one that I felt the least. It was the least Tarantino-ish. It was even Death Proof had his fingerprints over it the way that one did not.
Oh, that made amazing.
I disagree with that a little bit. I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it did feel like a Tarantino film, but it felt like some of his not so good instincts kind of writ large.
Could be.
You know what the best thing
like
though about all of them is he doesn't give a fuck what any of us think. That's the best part about it.
Well, that particular film was all hanging out, almost no story, all homage, all mood, of which those parts were done really well. But it's like I kept asking myself, where is this going?
I do want to bring back, actually, I thought it was pretty weak on a lot of that, but although the hangout aspect, and that's one thing I want to bring back around. It was while I was living in Salem that I read an interview with Tarantino where he was talking about the concept of a hangout film, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of that. And I love that idea, and I was surprised when he said his favorite hangout film was Jackie Brown, and I was like, I really think Pulp Fiction is his ultimate hangout film. I think Jackie Brown's a good one. And again, I think there are other films that for me fit the bill better. Maverick, Princess Bride, Oh Brother Art Thou. Those are more for me.
I think for Tarantino,
Jackie Brown is Jackie Brown is his least Tarantino film because that's an Elmore Leonard.
Well, but I think that's probably this is one of those situations where I think the reason he puts it up is that one is it was the most fun to make.
Well, again, his idea of a hangout film is it's a film you watch again and again because you just love spending time with the characters. And that was his feeling. Like, he probably had a blast making it, but he apparently really loved the characters. And that's why, he loved that one. But I will say that over time, my impression of Pulp Fiction has slipped a bit. But I still do think it is a phenomenal film. It is still one of my favorites. It has flaws. Mm-hmm. And again, as a screenwriter, I didn't get a screenwriting class, but as we alluded to in our Whiplash discussion, Brandon and I did take creative writing courses, and I do still hope to become a writer published one day. And
you write my screen anytime,
and one thing that I will say as a writer is that I do think in almost every way it's a brilliantly constructed screenplay. However, and this is partly my personal viewpoint, but partly my viewpoint as a writer, I don't see any need for a 2.5-hour movie to have 256 uses of a single word, most of which are simply just, they could have cut 50 of the fucks out of the movie, and it would not have made a difference. It would not have made a difference.
Jake clearly does not watch my YouTube videos. That's just how some of us motherfucking people talk, dude.
No. My point is they could have kept 50 of them, and it would have been brilliant. There are some very well placed ones in this film, like the one that gave Sam Jackson, where I said, I still think it's the one that says Pat.
The excessive. I was thinking about that, honestly. Believe it or not, I was actively thinking about that watching it this time, and I was like,
it's like I said, they could have cut 50, and it wouldn't have made a difference.
But it sounds like how people actually talk. I mean, you guys are nice dudes,
And Tarantino did not, to his credit, some characters used it excessively and some didn't at all. Like I think someone mentioned you can watch the wolf scenes. The wolf is very polite and well spoken, and if he says anything off color, he has a reason to say it.
Yeah.
But it's like
he stands out relative to the other characters, and that's very intentional. And not in the casting.
To be fair, as someone who films myself swearing like excessively on a regular basis, I do cut a fair amount of them.
Yeah. Well, the casting.
You don't need to hear me say fuck like 5, even though that's the way my whatever you want to call it, uneducated ass talks. You don't need to hear fucking like 6 fuck words in a sentence.
That's just what I'm saying. Like, it's the one area where I think his tendencies got a little bit away with him in this one. It's one of the few areas. There's a couple others, like his well publicized foot fetish gets some play in this movie, but some of that was pretty well done. But anyway,
he's a filmmaker who, the people who love him are going to really, really love him, and the people who don't are really going to not. And I'll say this because I'd say I'm more of a fan than not, and I sure did learn a whole lot, especially in the way of usage of music in film. If anything, that part of him is as strong as, if not stronger than, his writing, which is saying a lot.
And we'll definitely get to that because that's a big thing for this one.
There's nothing wrong with his foot fetish. Okay.
Well, but what I'm saying is that he's a filmmaker who, as much as I have liked more than not, his work, he is very indulgent. And I think even in a masterpiece like this, You know, it is very indulgent.
Yes.
And now that indulgent isn't necessarily bad, because indulgent can be done very well, like it is here. If anything, you know, David Lynch can, you know, especially in his later work, you know, he is not, you know, he can be very indulgent in his own way. It's not at all in the same way. But, and apparently, I learned this actually the other day. Apparently, Tarantino saw Twin Peaks Firewalk with me at the Cannes Film Festival and like walked out of it and was so pissed off at it because he was like, if David Lynch, you know, disappears further up his own ass, you know, blah blah blah, and it's like, and I loved him.
Yeah, I've read
Tarantino
a lot of that.
Calling somebody disappearing up their own ass. I'm like,
Firewalk with me is still fucking brilliant, and a lot of people have came around to it in recent years.
I know, but that's what I mean. It's like pot calling the kettle black, man.
Right. Well, at any rate, the film, this film, of course, is a very unusual structure film, and it is a very character-centric one. So I think probably we're going to mostly use character to move forward. But I wanted to at least mention that the film does have, I believe it's 4 basic title cards, if you will, not counting the credit sequence. It opens with...
The script structures it as follows. Yeah. You've got the prologue. You've got they don't, I guess you could either call this like part of the prologue, or you could call it like a little taste of the third story, but you got that. Then you got the 3 formal stories. Vincent Megan, Marcellus Wallace's wife, the Gold Watch, and the Bonnie situation. You know, those are the 3 stories. And then once you meet back up with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, that's the epilogue right there.
Right.
So that's our structure. Again, very novel-esque.
Right. Of course, the first title card is not an actual title. It's the introduction where they define pulp, which is kind of an interesting, or Pulp Fiction is kind of an interesting way to do it, which I believe Kevin Smith copied for Dogma, if I remember correctly. But this one does start with that prologue in the diner. And you get this little couple, this British couple, played by Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer, and they're having this nice little chat in a diner, like couples do. But very, you know, kind of, you come to find out pretty quickly that apparently their line of work is less than legal, and they're having a little debate about you know, what should we do next, and they hit on the idea of, why don't we knock off a diner?
Well, they don't hit on it. The dude is illustrating it the whole time. He's like, you know, we keep doing this other shit, and there's complications. You know, what if we hit a place that didn't have all that? You know, like the way they build up to it, script writing wise is fucking awesome.
Right.
In real life, those people would not have that at all. They'd be like, let's try this shit, and then they'd just do it.
Well, it's just like such a cute couple, and apparently Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer are old friends, and Plummer got the role because Roth said, I want to work with her, and I want her to have a really big gun. Something like
that. She really is the best. Like how she goes from being so soft-spoken to so fucking gnarly.
All right, then you think move, I'll execute every
fucking one of you. You know, like it's just, it gets me right fired up for the movie every time, and then it goes right into that down,
and that's one thing. Yeah, that's one thing I definitely want to mention is like, and I also wanted to mention, of course, you know, she calls him Pumpkin and he calls her Honey Bunny, and that's, but then they like, she does that. He's like, all right, it's a robbery, and she does that, and then it goes straight into Miserlou, an old surfing tune by Dick Dale and the Deltones, and I love that song. First of all, it's a great instrumental piece, but just you're right that the title card with the red and yellow old school looking type on black, and then they bring in the cast, and it's just like this old school title sequence with this kick-ass song.
Yeah,
and then in the middle of the
into
song,
some greasy old school shit, like
right,
as soon as you start the movie out. Yeah.
But then you have the needle change that they actually have the sound effects of the needle change. It skip over to Kool and the Gang with Jungle Boogie, and then you get to meet for the first time Jules and Vincent as they're driving down the road listening to Jungle Boogie and having a conversation about his trip to Amsterdam. And
super quick interjection with the opening title sequence. One of the things that the film was noted for, and very justifiably so, was the use of surf music, because it was very unusual, and it still is. Well, anybody that uses it now, it's an obvious copy of Pulp Fiction. But
there needs to be more surf rock. It's just
there does. But here's the.
I grew up on the Beach Boys.
Here's the story behind that. So Tarantino, like pretty much every movie he's ever done, has been influenced by spaghetti westerns in some way. And what he said was, because like I'm thinking Ennio Morricone, even like his Man with No Name films, you hear some rock influences in addition to orchestral stuff. But what he said on the special edition, the 10th anniversary edition of the Pulp Fiction soundtrack, there's like a little interview, and he said, I always really dug surf music a lot, okay? But I never understood what the hell it had to do with surfing. To me, it sounded like rock and roll spaghetti western music. That's my Tarantino impression.
Exactly.
But
I really love it.
That's where his head is at, throughout the whole thing.
With the same intro song, that'd be amazing.
What happened?
Sorry,
what's that?
Sorry. I was saying that, so in other words, keep that in mind, that is where his head is at pretty much at all times. Like, it's kind of a spaghetti western by other means, even if it's contemporary times.
I did see his comment about something like it was spaghetti western rock or something like that. Now, I did see that written somewhere, and that was kind of fun. But then, of course, this scene is the one that gives us that famed Royale with cheese moment. Where they're talking about the little differences between, America and Europe. And the one that I always loved, because I was a waiter for several years, and I don't know that I ever saw people drown in fries and mayonnaise, but that one line where he's like, I seen them do it, man. They fucking drown them in that shit. I'm like, I know that.
I'm just telling you right now, it's true, dude. It is like definitely like kind of a Scandinavian thing.
I'm not talking. I'm not talking specifically. I'm not talking specifically the mayo and fries. It's like I said, working as a waiter, there were so many combinations I would see or know of that I'd be like, that line would go through my head, like. See him do it.
Apparently, the mayonnaise thing. Apparently, that's real.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, dude. Like in certain provinces of Canada, it is definitely like the standard,
right?
Accompaniment of fries. And, like you'll just get like a little thing full of mayonnaise.
I like that description. The accompaniment. So, but that's a good intro. Let's. Actually, I guess first of all. We touched a little bit, but does anyone have more they really want to talk about with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny as characters, like more that they really want to throw out there?
I mean, that whole scene sets it up nicely. It doesn't really pay off till later in the movie.
Right. So we could save them for the end.
Yeah. Again, looking at it from the magazine standpoint, that would have been like the 4-page spread at the beginning of the thing, and then it would have said continued on page 66.
Right.
One of little quick interjection there on those two. So apparently, one of Tarantino's favorite movies. He's a big Howard Hawks fan, and one of his favorite movies, because of how lightning fast the dialogue is, and it is very fast, is His Girl Friday. And he actually specifically mentions His Girl Friday in the script in that opening scene as far as the pacing of the dialogue.
Okay. That makes sense. I've seen that movie, but it's been a minute. But I know what you mean. Definitely a rat-a-tat-tat kind of speed there. So back to the scene then, I guess, with Jules and Vincent. They're heading to a job where there's these people who have taken something from their boss, Marcellus Wallace, and they go up, and as they're going up, Vincent's asking all these questions about, as they say, the big man's wife. And you hear the story about how this other associate of theirs had gotten thrown off a balcony for apparently giving a foot massage.
Yeah, basically the discussion is about whether or not a fucking foot rub is an internet, you know, and
which
it is. I'm fully on his side about that, you know, like it's
Don't be telling me about foot massages. I'm the foot master.
Even if you don't,
I don't
chuck
be
the motherfucker
enough
out a window for giving your wife a foot massage, you're looking at him sideways after that. Like what?
Right.
You know.
Well, and Vincent comes back with a great, Jules is like, I'm the foot master. I don't be tickling or nothing. And then Vincent's like, would you give a man a foot massage?
Fuck you. Yeah, their whole conversation is impeccable. I mean, it's like that's what we're all talking about here with the dialogue that's written in that way that only he could do. Mm-hmm. They have that whole conversation, and then they go back in there and get to business, you know.
Right. So, well, and it's like before they open the door, it's almost as an afterthought. Why do you care so much about the big man's wife anyway? Oh, yeah, he's going out of town. He asked me to look after her. Yeah. It's like, yeah. And then, they go in and, they meet Brett and Flock of Seagulls and Marvin. And and they find the missing item, which is a briefcase, and Vincent. But while Vincent's looking for it, you got that great little bit where Jules is asking him about Brett about his food, and the whole Big Kahuna Burger, which is a little Easter egg in a lot of Tarantino's films, and the whole he's just kind of screwing with the guy. That is a tasty burger. You mind if I have some of your beverage to wash down?
Yeah, and that's the part that always, I don't know, just drinking someone else's fast food beverage.
Yeah, it's a little gross. Now, interesting little tidbit here, because apparently somebody worked this out and Tarantino confirmed it. So there are a couple different Tarantino universes in his work. There's what he refers to as the realer than real universe, which it encompasses movies like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Glorious Bastards, Django Unchained, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then there's the I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically the in-movie universe. In other words, it's the universe where the characters from the movies I named, they would go see these movies. So in other words, they're like movies within the universe, and those movies include the Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2 and Death Proof. So in other words, those are films within the larger Tarantino universe, and then the one that's kind of the outlier is Jackie Brown, because that's an Elmore Leonard adaptation.
Right, and I do know that there are direct references to Reservoir Dogs. In fact, they originally had Michael Madsen lined up for Vincent Vega, and he couldn't do it, and so they got Tarantino. And they decided he would be Mr. Blonde's character's brother. That's kind of... and then, of course, the whole Bonnie situation. Apparently, Bonnie was mentioned in a cut scene from Reservoir Dogs. So that was... so there are some direct
Thankfully,
cuts there,
this was several years before fucking Travolta got into Scientology and started believing the movie Phenomena was real.
He was into Scientology way fucking earlier than that.
Was he into it back in these days?
Yeah, definitely. He was in there since the 70s.
He was in some weird stuff even then, but
here's some interesting...
At least he rolls with it. You ever watch his Instagram nowadays?
Okay.
He looks like a goddamn serial killer. Like, if you look at his eyes during that shit, it's like he's got bodies buried somewhere.
Before the term cinematic universe got coined, only comic book fans really knew about, and people who grew up with Universal monster films and stuff, only they really got the whole concept of the shared universe or whatever. And you can, we know explicitly, beyond
and
explicitly,
Full Moon
that,
fans, man.
well, we know beyond explicitly that Kevin Smith is a massive comic book guy and always has been. That's been front and center. But you can also tell Tarantino, being of the same kind of generation and disposition, you can also tell he's a big comic book guy because, especially in Reservoir Dogs, you see the Silver Surfer poster. He references the Ben Grimm, aka the Thing. It's you can tell that he's definitely that kind of guy. It's just not nearly as front and center as it is with Kevin Smith. But the whole shared universe and some of these little elements that cross over, it's it's there. It most
anybody was having a hard time figuring out Quentin Tarantino was a nerd. You look at the fucking dude and you say his name.
Right.
He might as well be cast in Revenge of the Nerds or some shit.
Or you watch any interview that he does or listen or whatever. But anyway, so you have this confrontation where Vincent does find the briefcase and opens it up. And of course, that's one of the interesting things about this movie is the briefcase. It's the ultimate MacGuffin. No one knows for sure what it is. And there's and Tarantino has refused over the years to give a clear answer. He says he wants the audience to, you decide what's in it. You know?
Drugs or money.
I know exactly what was in that briefcase. A yellow light bulb.
Well, yeah, there was that. There was a little light bulb.
That's what it was on the set, but I like to think in the story, in the universe, it was really a yellow light bulb. Although in earlier versions of the script, it was actually diamonds, and that kind of tied into the whole.
Yeah, I like to think it was just drugs. It was just a thing that they were supposed to get because Vincent and especially Jules seemed like they were both sort of those dudes questioning what the hell their life was about or whatever.
Right.
So if it was riches, I'd like to think maybe Jules would have, but he was a man of God.
The thing that and this could also kind of help explain their I guess Jules' willingness to believe in a miracle or whatever, but the most common explanation I've heard, which again, Tarantino's neither confirmed or denied this, but certainly the circumstantial evidence is there is the claim that it's actually Marcellus's soul. And of course, you open it up and it's this glowing golden light that bathes the viewer, and everyone that sees it is enchanted. And there's also the part that when you first see Marcellus Wallace, you see the back of his head, and he happens to have a Band-Aid right over the back of the base of his skull, which is where the soul would have been removed. And the combination to the briefcase is 666. It's there's all this
what's interesting about the Band-Aid thing? So that actually has a practical purpose. It's because Ving Rhames actually has a scar on the back of his neck, and so they were covering that up.
Right. Yeah, but it lends itself to that fun, idea of, this could be what's going on. But so then they've got the the fame part that you see in all the trailer, or not trailers necessarily, but the pastiche trailers that you see over the years.
Sizzle reels, bro. That's what they're called.
I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration? The part where he just randomly murders flock of seagulls without, even blinking an eye while he's talking to Brett.
I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
Yes, you've got that great speech. English, motherfucker. Do you speak it? Say what again? I dare you. That's great. I love that whole interchange.
Well, dude, and that's the thing. Anybody that didn't, I'm sure Forrest might remember this, but there was that alternate poster. I don't know if it was an alternate poster. It might have been a Hot Topic thing. but where it was like Jules and Vincent holding their guns, and it had that whole Ezekiel.
Oh, I know that. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I knew several people that had that like on their wall as well.
I remember that.
Yeah. It was after like we had the Pulp Fiction poster. It was like later on in high school, but you saw those people where it was like, oh shit, there's that Pulp Fiction thing.
Right. And then of course, after he takes out Brett, they both take out Brett, and then you fade into the next scene, which is the first proper chapter, if you will, which is Vincent Vega and Marcellus Wallace's wife. And that's the part that actually starts, I think that part starts with the prelude, if I remember correctly, where Butch is meeting with Wallace.
Yep.
And that is our introduction to Butch more than Wallace. And it's interesting because you're sitting there watching Bruce Willis's reaction to Ving Rhames speaking off camera. You don't really actually see Wallace all that much in that scene. And so it's a very interesting introduction to both characters. Basically, so Butch is a prize fighter who never really made it, like what we were talking about in Whiplash. He would have been one of the kids in the class that the teacher ignored, basically. And he is kind of getting near the end of his usefulness. And so Wallace is paying him to take a dive, basically. And then you get to, ultimately, of course, he doesn't take the dive. He decides
heavily again, like
he bet, he took that money and bet
the whole thing and like made a bunch of cash.
Yeah, and accidentally killed the guy in the process. And that's an interesting sequence where he's driving away in the taxi, and you got the Esmeralda Villalobos, which apparently is a character straight out of a short film called Curdled that Tarantino was a big fan of. And he took that character and put her in the movie and then financed a full-length version of the film, apparently.
I feel like stylistically that's how the entire movie of Sin City was built.
Yeah.
Because if you watch that scene a couple times over, put it in black and white and watch it, the shit flashing across their faces.
And actually, Tarantino did
the lighting and shit. Like
the Sin City film adaptation structurally, if you've ever watched that film, watch it and back to back with Pulp Fiction. It's structured exactly the same way.
It's very similar. And again, that was his boy Rodriguez on that one, and he did direct one of the scenes. He did direct one of the scenes with, if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't it Bruce Willis's character and Benicio del Toro's head? I believe it was.
It was Del Toro and Clive Owen.
Clive Owen. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
there's overlap for sure, though. I mean, in the way they shot that, like.
Oh, we need to do Sin City.
It really struck me this time where it was like, this is Sin City right here. Like, if you put this, like the visual look of it, if you were to put it in like black and white, turn the contrast down, boom, there you go.
Right. And then meanwhile, you get Vincent getting ready for his big date, if you will. He goes to his boy Lance's place to pick up some heroin. I think they called it the Mad Dog or whatever it was. Or Madman, that's what it was, the Madman. And Dave, you were talking earlier about how Tarantino tended to just draw things out. I watched the extended version of that scene earlier today. Definitely, and part of the one with Esmeralda, they definitely cut down a lot of the time that could have been in the film. But at any rate, you've got that scene where he meets, and I want to talk about the scene where Vega meets Mia Wallace, because Mia Wallace, of course, is Uma Thurman, the character that Dave has been displaying this whole time. I mentioned in Whiplash, we've alluded to it already. I am a huge pusher for use of music in film. one of the absolute greatest music cues in movie history, in my mind, is when Mia Wallace is meeting the hitman, Vincent Vega, and puts it puts a record on, and it's Dusty Springfield's "Son of a Preacher Man," and I'm like, the implication being that she is the young girl meeting with her illicit lover who happens to be
right, and then she's
the son of a preacher
playful
man
thing where she's like leading him through the house with the camera and stuff. I mean,
well, they cut the camera part of it from the final, but I do love that though. Just the whole juxtaposition of what is a kick-ass song with just that particular scene. And then when she actually, you see like her lips at the microphone or whatever, but other than that, her introduction, again, this plays back to Tarantino's foot fetish, but it's also a callback to the dialogue with Jules, where she walks in barefoot and the camera is following her feet and not her. And that's her proper introduction, where and I'm like, that's an interesting little callback and also strange stylistic choice.
Well, interesting fact about Son of a Preacher Man there. So Tarantino, this was again that I'd highly recommend that interview on the 10th anniversary soundtrack because it gave me a lot of insight into, because like what he said is, well, two things. One, he said that it's one of the things I do when I'm starting a movie. Just forget starting a movie. When I think about writing a film, and I had like an idea for a film, is what I'll do is I'll go through my record collection and just start playing songs and trying to basically, I guess in some ways, find the personality of the movie. The spirit of the movie. So he'll do that, but then also, like he said with Son of a Preacher Man specifically, he said that he had the idea for a scene in which a guy goes to pick up a girl and is nervous about it. He'd had that idea for that scene in his head for 6 or 7 years before filming it, and it was always scored in his head to Son of a Preacher Man.
Nice.
And so, yeah, interesting fact about that.
I thought it was kind of interesting that when you started your impression, when you sped up the vocals, it sounded like Tarantino. But honestly, for a minute there, I was hearing Woody Allen. And
I kind of caught that myself, but then I've listened to that interview so many times and he's got a very imitable way of speaking, and so I've really tried to get it down.
But I do think it's interesting because, again, if you look at the people who know how to use music in movies, I believe as far as the actual directors, I'm not sure I can necessarily give the Coen brothers themselves credit, but definitely they've surrounded themselves, T-Bone Burnett, Carter Burwell, they have surrounded themselves with people that are phenomenal at that. But as far as actual directors, I don't think there's probably. I think probably the best people out there would be. I'm tempted to say Damien Chazelle based on what I've seen, but definitely Quentin Tarantino, Marty Scorsese, and Woody Allen. All three just phenomenal ear for music and how to use it in a movie, and Wes Anderson, I would say as well. And it's just they all are so good at that. And then, of course, you get more of it because Mia and Vince go to Jackrabbit Slims for you get that nice, like really, really. It looked like it would be like a really good, you talk about nostalgia fest. That diner looks like a major nostalgia fest. You got people dressed.
What do you think? I think it's like a wax museum with a pulse.
It was the opposite though, because we've seen Nostalgia Fest diners before. Because remember when we were at Ghost World, we saw
this was done well
of the same spectrum. Because it's the one that they went to in Ghost World was the opposite on the opposite spectrum, whereas that one was sort of like this dead diner that was mimicking this and trying to move off of nostalgia. This one was like the happening pulse of the city, moving around, and you could see people singing, people interacting. It was just like the hop in place. And that I thought it was an interesting contrast as to what could be.
Yeah, well, of course it was hopping. It was Jackrabbit's limbs. But anyway, but you've got, of course, here the famous dance contest with the, where they're playing "You Never Can Tell," which is a pretty great soundtrack for that. And again, I'm willing to watch a dance breakdown if it's intriguing and done well. Usually, I get bored by those, but this was one that didn't. But before that, we did see our brief Steve Buscemi cameo as the Buddy Holly waiter, which was kind of another tie into Ghost World, actually.
Yep.
And then the whole thing about the $5 shake, which, I have to admit, back in the early 90s, that sounded obscene, but like nowadays,
it's not even uncommon.
Yeah,
you're lucky to pay $5.
Here's another little interesting bit of trivia. So remember what I mentioned about Kill Bill kind of being a movie within the universe or whatever of his larger universe. So apparently, people have said that when she talks about Fox Force 5, how that would have been like a TV show kind of knockoff of Kill Bill. In the movies universe, so that's kind of interesting. But then also,
and they kind of describe the
angels, I think.
Yeah, well, I think where he's going is they kind of describe the Deadly Viper assassination squad.
Exactly. Well, and that was actually very common for like TV shows to take something that worked in movies and kind of sort of do something like that for TV. Not like a direct adaptation, but they would do something very similar, and that was very common back in the day. So that's just interesting food for thought there. But then also like this is, I don't think it's nothing new to say this is one of Travolta's defining roles, but like or rather redefining roles, I should say. But I have to give him extra special kudos in that scene because for the most part, he's played like this very, not just hard edge, but like, he kind of talks like, that's it. And what did Marcellus do? He kind of talks down there and, so he's very kind of low key, but he's very serious. He's he's serious in his demeanor, even though he makes a lot of jokes and stuff, but like, he's very kind of down there vocally, all that stuff. And then when he's like, you tell that to 50 million people and you can't tell me, I promise I won't laugh. Like that whole thing, I was like, oh,
that's what I'm worried about.
There's the Travolta charm coming, and I was like, that whole moment, I thought that was so great to see that side of this character come out because, you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be that, like pull off a smile like that and really.
But what's going on? Did we lose someone?
I think we lost Dane.
Huh. Well, another thing I'll note here is that Tarantino and Lawrence Bender are producer on this. Their production company, A Band Apart, is apparently a play on a film Bande Apart by Jean-Luc Godard. And there's a dance sequence in that film that apparently they copied heavily for this one. So, I think everyone always thought this was like an original sequence, but they heavily homage Godard with that.
Oh, yeah, it's not surprising when Tarantino is a little, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
And he everyone's like, oh man, they got Travolta, so they had him dance. It was like, no, they had a dance sequence. So, I'm glad I got Travolta.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then of course he takes Mia home, and he goes in the bathroom. He's talking about how he's going to make his exit, and meanwhile, she goes rifling through his coat and finds something in a baggie, and
you're just gonna say goodnight. This is a moral test of oneself as to whether or not
I'll let you guys go through this scene first before I enter.
Now keep in mind they set this scene up earlier on when he is buying
she has those 2 rails.
And basically he said, yeah, this stuff is like above and beyond the rest.
Right.
Yeah, it'll fuck
They
you
also
up.
they set it up a couple of other ways, and I think one of the things I'm guessing one of the points Mo was going to make maybe had to do with drug dealing etiquette. Apparently, you're not supposed to pack heroin the way you pack coke, and that's exactly what the dealer did.
Well, you're also not supposed to rifle through people's fucking
Well,
jacket pockets and just do their drugs,
that goes without saying.
So basically, she thought it was coke because
Yeah.
she was chopping up the coke at the beginning.
Yep.
The whole lead up to it is him telling him
Mhm.
like coke is dead as fuck. Like no one's doing that shit.
And she's doing it because actually I love the play on the typical I'm going to go powder my nose.
Yes,
Which she did in a manner of speaking.
She assumes he's just got coke to placate her or whatever, and so she snorts it, and it turns out it's some fucking ramped up heroin. Yeah.
Fun fact: I knew somebody, like the group of friends that I had in like the first half of my college career, the first 2 years. Someone, we loved this film. We loved American Psycho. We would quote it back and forth, that kind of stuff. And this particular person I'm thinking of, he would crunch up and snort Adderall, which basically gives you a similar sensation. And he would throw his head back and be like, "I said, God damn," as a homage.
I've done that several times, taking lines of coke, dude. I was probably pretty much the dude who probably would have sold you drugs in fucking college if that was our places in the world at the time. And definitely, it is easy to mistake the two, which is why you don't fuck around and do someone else's drugs because you don't know what it is.
Right. And also just because it's rude, but that's
it is like also super rude to snort someone's coke out of their pocket, even if it is cocaine.
Right. Yeah. And we should mention, of course, the drug dealer is Eric Stoltz. He has nice little role there.
It's not nice.
Oh yeah. So basically, he comes back.
Supposedly, Eric Stoltz and Rosanna Arquette. Supposedly, their roles were originally supposed to go to Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love. But of course,
that's what Courtney Love
how that worked out.
Apparently, Courtney Love said that, but Tarantino has said, "I never thought about doing that." So, yeah, that was my.
Although Kurt Cobain is thanked in the liner notes of the album.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't mean that he was.
Right.
I wouldn't trust a fucking thing Courtney Love says.
Right. And there were a lot of intriguing, also almost things like, for example, apparently the Weinsteins were pushing for Daniel Day-Lewis to play Vincent Vega. I mean, that would have been a totally different
dude.
Thing. But
as much as I love him, I don't think he could have done it the same.
Yeah. It wouldn't have been the same. It might have been good, but it wouldn't have been the same.
I don't even know if it would have been. It would have been. Well, see, I'm thinking of like. Yeah. There Will Be Blood, Daniel Day-Lewis. So,
well, he was a little younger,
and he's a very accomplished actor. So,
yeah,
a lot of what he can do is it's varied. I thought.
Yeah, he could have done something pretty impressive, but
it wouldn't have that, actually like.
I actually like the story apparently about how they got Travolta in on this. Apparently Tarantino is a huge fan of his, like a hero worshipped him almost. And he puts like Grease and Saturday Night Fever and Urban Cowboy and all those as like formative films for him. And he's also a hardcore collector of old school board games. And apparently he got Travolta over one night and they stayed up all night playing a Welcome Back Kotter board game and just shooting the shit. And
you might not realize, but Grease is a fucking huge deal for me, dude.
Oh yeah,
I was in the play in like fucking junior
you have
high.
to do that eventually.
I know that story, and what's crazy is that like if you really peel it back, it's like because Tarantino, somebody said it once that he is so obsessed with being seen as cool, which is true. But like you really peel back the layers, and a lot of the vulnerable man that's underneath there, especially in his early days, it's like it's sort of a little creepy, a little pathetic as far as like his degree of like hero worship of John Travolta, to the point where they met up where Tarantino's apartment at the time. Apparently, John Travolta used to live in that exact unit, which that was more of a coincidence. That was more of a coincidence, but like you said, the board game thing, just the sheer degree of hero worship that he had for him,
and yet to hear Travolta tell it, and yet by the end of the conversation, Tarantino was saying, "But you know, man, I really don't like your recent choices."
Yeah, I know.
And that sort of thing. And Travolta was offended at first, and then thought about it. He's like, but this is coming from a place of love. This is not just criticism. This is, I can work with this. But apparently, Tarantino really wanted him to play Seth Gecko in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah,
and Travolta's like, man, I just don't dig vampires. So I like that Pulp Fiction you were talking about. I like that.
I think that was very wise, because whenever you've seen John Travolta try to play supernatural characters outside of Phenomenon,
I saw Angel twice in the drive-in, and it was horrible both times. But I loved it because
outside of Phenomenon.
That was a good one.
He did a really good job in that.
It's also pretty bad if you really rewatch it, though.
I haven't seen it in years. I'll give it a go eventually. Yeah. But so he sees his overdosing boss's wife, freaks out, goes dashing back to the drug dealer's place, and then you got that weird, crazy scene with the adrenaline needle and all that. And apparently there's even a nod there to the fact that Eric Stoltz was the original Marty McFly, because apparently they have the same board game set up next to the TV that they had in Back to the Future.
Well, fun fact about that, I don't know if you guys will give a shit, but we thought that scene was so funny in high school that apparently we felt the need to scrawl it in like big fat permanent graffiti marker on a heating duct in my garage, which is where we used to hang out back in the day.
Okay.
So it's still cool. Back there says a black pen, a fucking felt pen, like it says that on the fucking heating duct.
Nice.
I didn't put it there. I think it was my buddy Keegan who thought that was like the funniest fucking thing in there. We did used to say it all the time, like a pen, a fucking felt pen.
Now, I do have to admit that one of the things that for me is a little bit iffy in this film is there is a lot of debate about how much the film glorifies drug use, and I feel like it's definitely, that scene does show that there can be consequences.
As a former drug user, all of it is fucking, like, honestly, dude, I sat there this time being like, damn, I kind of missed cocaine,
I could see how it would be
it's not something you'd want to show somebody that is hardcore, that had problems with addiction and isn't. I was a recreational drug user, so
you don't want
for me it's a fond memory, but it's
like especially the scene where Travolta's taken the madman in the first place and he's going to meet Mia, and they've got like this, the way it's filmed, it's almost like a sex scene in some way.
Yeah, dude, when he fucking shoots up that heroin, like I don't necessarily know that firsthand, because heroin was the one thing I would never fuck with, but after like the coke bump with her, I could understand how she might like snort the heroin in his pocket, thinking it was fucking coke.
Now, one good thing that has come along is that with the advent of Narcan, you don't have to use an adrenaline needle to stab it right in the chest anymore, which is a which is a slightly good thing, I think.
Yeah,
days.
that was always pretty gnarly, you know.
It's really all about that guy's Speed Racer fucking T-shirt during all that shit.
Yeah, I just noticed that yesterday.
Well, so you know what, that scene, like it is meant to be kind of disturbing, obviously, but like the part that disturbed me when I saw that was more so, and again, this is from someone that has never taken one puff of anything, no nothing, you know, no alcohol, no anything.
You should try weed someday, but other than that, stay away from it.
But anyway, like what got me about it was not so much that she was overdosing, because like if it wasn't that, it could have been like, you know, I'm thinking from my neck of the woods, you know, like someone's having an allergic reaction, or, you know, some other kind of health problem is happening, you know, that kind of stuff happens. Again, not necessarily because of an overdose, but like sudden immediate medical emergencies happen. What disturbed me was the fact that most of the people there other than Vincent were relatively nonchalant about it, especially his wife was, and especially the other girl that was there that had like one line. You know, like I was like, she's fucking dying, man. Get off the fucking couch and do something. But now I understand it's because they're, you know, fucking junkies.
Dude,
but
not necessarily that.
But I've definitely been in that position of like, you're not fucking dying here, man.
Right.
Like, you guys got to take that shit up the street.
Yeah.
I didn't invite you over to fucking like die here. So that
I'm not even speaking so much about Eric Stoltz himself, because he was definitely in the situation because, well, Vincent made it so, because he crashed into the fucking house. But like I'm thinking specifically everybody else, like it was like, you know, okay, I get it, you're not the lead in this situation, but it's like, get the fuck off the couch and do something, you know. But that's, again, my goody clean cut, you know, ass assessing the situation and not
from the
like
other end, okay, like not being your goody clean cut ass. I've definitely had situations where people brought somebody to my house and it was like, oh, I gotta fish this chick out of the fucking hot tub because she's passed out in there, you know, and I wrapped her in a blanket and like gave her to the people and was like, you guys gotta leave, you know. You can't just be here with like some chick that you're gonna fucking get killed with at my house. Like,
well, and I don't entirely blame Lance for I don't entirely blame Lance like at that onset for like, you fucked her up, you fucking deal with this. But
exactly,
of course,
so I relate to that a little bit. Where it's like, don't bring that bitch back to my house, dude.
I don't necessarily blame him there, but I mean, like, when it's too late to not do, you know, like he's kind of
I just thumped her with the fucking needle, and I wouldn't even have had that conversation with him about like, no, it would be like, boom, there, she's awake, get the fuck out of here, you know.
Well, that or like you know, the best that his wife can muster is, that was fucking trippy. that weird laugh she has.
I've seen some shit like that, and it's not fun. I mean, it's like you don't want those people around, and you don't want the people that are taking drugs to the point where they
which and you know, it's like, try, you know, getting into this movie when you're a teenager and trying to, because your parents are like the only meaningful contact you have with people, and it's like trying to, you know, talk things out with them, and like, you know, you have someone like my mom who's like really hardcore anti any substance, anti, you know, like big morality kind of person. It's like, you know, try to let them into your world about what all you're learning about filmmaking, and try to have a conversation with them. And they're like, actually, you know, really offended that you're, you know.
Well, talking about that real quick, and then we'll move on. But talking about learning things about filmmaking, apparently Travolta has never used heroin, or claimed he hasn't, and never wanted to. And he wanted to be convincing. So apparently Tarantino knew someone who was familiar with it, and he told him, basically, he's like, you just need to get really, really hammered on tequila and lay in a hot tub, and you will start to know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And so Travolta apparently was very happy to go to his wife and say, I have been told to drink tequila for my role. And it's like, I just thought that was kind of an amusing little, but that'll mess
the
you
late
up.
great Kelly Preston.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
But
well, that's the thing, man. I mean, if you're gonna fucking do drugs, though, whatever you're doing, do drugs responsibly. Don't overdo it. Don't fucking push yourself to that point where you have to go to the fucking hospital.
Right.
Yep.
So, speaking of being late, we are really, really pushing it, and we have not got anywhere close to all the way through the plot. So let's just
there's no plot. Really,
yeah, well, there's plot points, but we'll go ahead and just see. Does anyone really have? We've kind of touched on all the characters we've gotten to so far. But does anyone have more they really want to throw out regarding some of the I guess the side characters like Lance or any of them? Anything more before we move on to more substantive stuff?
I like that they're watching when he is like, "Fuck you, Lance, answer!" when he's calling him and he can't get a hold of him. I like the fact that they're watching one of the 4 public domain Three Stooges shorts. The one that they're watching is Brideless Groom, and it's like, I love that. I love the I don't know who this is. I'm hanging up the phone. Prank caller.
Right.
Also, I did isolate that part of the vocal track where it's like, "Fuck you, Lance, answer!" From my cousin. I always call him my little cousin Lance because he is younger than me, but he's really 17 years old, and we hang out all the time. So, but there are times I call him and he doesn't answer, and it's like I'm going to be sending him that, because he's seen that several times with me actually, so he'll recognize what.
So the next major segment, of course, is the gold watch, and that's the part where we see the
continue
Butch going back to get the watch from his apartment, which we kind of skipped the introduction of the watch, which Forrest has on his little screen cap there. Our one scene with Christopher Walken, where he basically shows up to a young Butch.
The movie and makes it and makes it a masterpiece just in the one scene alone.
Right, and it's just like this one long monologue about his being a POW with his father.
I'll be damned.
Forget everything that came before and forget everything that comes afterwards. That scene alone makes the movie a masterpiece.
It really does, dude.
Because only Christopher Walken could say those lines, and and he delivers them for 95% of the scene. He delivers them like he's trying to win an Oscar. Like he gives it his all. He's got feeling. You can tell he's on the verge of tears, and then all of a sudden it takes a U-turn like you wouldn't believe.
I hit this uncomfortable piece of
metal last 2 years.
Growing up as a potty humor trauma kid, that is one of the best fucking scenes in cinema history.
Actually. So he hit it. The one place he knew he hit it. The one place he knew he could hide something. His ass. 5 long years.
He wore his watch up his ass.
Then he died of dysentery.
Yeah, no shit, he did.
It's just so perfect. That's how you know fucking Quentin was one of us,
Yeah. Well, no, he was. He was a big trauma guy.
Right. And I can't help but thinking that having Christopher Walken as a POW may have been a nod to Deer Hunter. I mean, that was
it has to have
been. It has to be, dude. Deer Hunter is magnificent.
What makes it is that he takes that scene really seriously and does a damn good job of it. Like he's in a Deer Hunter type movie again. But
That's
again,
one of those flicks that's kind of along the same lines as Whiplash, where it's a great movie, but it's just not fucking fun.
Exactly. Yeah. I need to watch my copy for that reason. It's been sitting on the shelf for some time. So you have that, but then you can flash back to the present where Butch's girlfriend, Fabienne, a very cute Portuguese actress, Maria de Medeiros. From what's that?
I was looking in the mirror and I thought it would be nice if I had a pot.
Pot belly.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was one of the weirdest out of nowhere things that a person could say in that moment. But again, that's Tarantino for you.
But it was fun. It was different. It gave her a bit of character and a bit of interest. And she had that cute little accent.
I seriously wonder though if that's one of those things that much like his foot fetish, it's one of those things he secretly. It's one of those things.
Yeah, no disrespect towards the fetish or the accent at all. It was adorable. Like that lady is one of the most adorable things about the movie.
I love it how they're all like lovey-dovey and shit.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the gold watch is gone. He's like, motherfucker.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, he's clearly got a violent side to him, like outside of the ring. Obviously.
And I think he does have that line. So I'm like, do you have any idea what my father went through?
To get me that. I don't have time to go into it, but he went through a lot.
Well, and then there's that part where he like apologizes to her, but then he's still flipping out in the car. Like he's not, he's not on the level of he has some violent tendencies, but he's not a douchebag like some of the people in previous movies that we watched.
He tries, and Tarantino apparently modeled him on very hot-headed. There was one particular character, I can't remember offhand who it was, but anyway, so he gets back to the apartment and he finds a watch right where he thought it would be, and he fixes himself some Pop-Tarts, or starts to, and then he sees this huge-ass gun.
Store-brand Pop-Tarts.
Yeah.
Yes, but this huge-ass gun just sitting there, and he hears the noise in the bathroom, and then, of course, Vincent's sitting there, and they're reading a novel, and he comes out, and then, oh, crap.
Now there's a very interesting kind of distinguishing characteristic about Vincent Vega as a character, which obviously comes to a head in this scene, but has been set up throughout all the scenes we've seen him in thus far, and will continue to be established in the chronologically not in order third segment. Which is that, well, it's a very food-centric movie, if you remember, like Beyond the Royale with Cheese, but like, Fabienne mentions the big pile of blueberry pancakes, that whole thing. And it's like Rob Egger in his video about the product placement in the film, he's like, I feel like eating every time I watch this movie. But it's like, so there's that, but like for Vincent Vega specifically, what's on his mind a lot of the time, it's like, he says to this romantic moment with Mia, I got to take a piss. That's a little more information than I needed to know, Vincent, but go right ahead. And then, what's he doing when he gets killed? He's taking a shit. And then what happens right before the shit goes down in the epilogue? It's, he's like, I'm going to take a shit. Like, to be continued. And he's reading pulpy magazines, of course, while on the shitter.
I've always taken those other scenes to be too, that if like Jules was there, he wouldn't have gotten gunned down. Like Butch would be dead if Jules was
there is a lot of there's a lot to do with bathrooms in this one generally, but it does seem that every time Vincent goes to the bathroom and he comes out, his world has changed.
Yeah, well, because remember that she snorts the heroin accidentally after he's trying to give himself a little stabilizing pep talk. There, he's like, "You're just gonna go out there and you say, I've had a good night. I've had a very lovely evening. Get in the car, go home, and jerk off, and that's all you can do."
Yeah, he's trying not to bang her, and it gets so much worse,
And then of course, so he gets gunned down by Butch, and Butch goes running away. And then who should he run into in a scene very, very reminiscent of a similar scene in Psycho? He sees Marcellus Wallace.
Motherfucker.
Exactly. And he's carrying his box of donuts and drinks. It's clear that he was on the stakeout with Vega. and probably walked off, leaving his gun there. That was probably his gun.
Yeah.
And so he goes, Butch sees it, guns it, runs him over. And then when they both come to, they go traipsing after each other, end up in a pawn shop. Shout out quickly to the Statler Brothers, "Flowers on the Wall," another great song on the soundtrack when Butch was driving.
But he turns to see Butch.
That's my pawn shop.
He turns to see Butch in the car, and right then it's good to see you. I must go. Right. I know I look a fright. It's like perfect.
That is true. And then they get to the pawn shop, and the guy behind the counter, Maynard, is like, no, not my. He restrains him. He restrains him.
What you're stopping here?
I like the fact that it's a couple different things going on in the prop department in that pawn shop, because not only do you have a little bit of humor with like the ascending level of severity with the possible weapons, like you got
I love that.
The baseball bat, you got the chainsaw, you got the katana, all that stuff, the hammer, all that stuff. But
that opening is like
before. That, of course, is toward the end, and
but what we can see right away when we're in there that does tie into later. But what we can already see is that we've got a couple clues there. We've got the American flag right next to the Confederate flag, so we already get an idea that these guys are Southern boys who are probably up to no good, as we find out. Indeed,
but
that's the case.
Still don't expect where it goes from there.
Exactly.
Full on deliverance.
But what's great about it is that it has two meanings. Because one, we can assume that they're Southern boys who are up to no good, which in fact they are. But right next to that, you also see all the license plates, including Tennessee, which is where Butch is going. So it's like pointing the way to say that, you got to do this one thing so you can have a clean break.
And not to mention that when Zed shows up, he's played by Peter Green, and that tells you right there he's up to no good because it's Peter Green.
I mean, in the same year where he was the bad guy in The Mask,
Right. So we've got, like I said, they've got that weird, creepy scene in the basement where they decide to take Marcellus into the back room, Russell's room, as they called it, I believe, and they leave the Gimp, this weird creature wearing full body gear, to watch Butch.
BDSM pet.
And Butch
I really love just how much of that, like the full extent of whatever it is they got going on. Right. I like the fact that the full extent of that is still deliberately left a mystery to us, because it's like, who the fuck is the Gimp? Where did he come from?
You don't need all that info.
But whatever the full extent of
whatever it is, you don't really want to know.
That's what I mean. It's like
gonna call in a couple of pipe hitting inwards.
We get to that in a moment, because you got
pliers and a blowtorch.
You got Butch gets away and knocks out the Gimp and goes up, and that's where you have that scene Dane alluded to, where he sees a claw hammer, and then he picks up a baseball bat. And then he picks up a chainsaw, and then he looks up at the katana and just gets this look like that's it. And I love
that was a great bit of subtle humor there.
It was a great bit of subtle humor, but it also was great in a couple of other ways. One, a katana's less messy than a couple of those other options, and two. It has association, especially for someone like Tarantino, who's obsessed with samurai films.
Yeah.
It definitely has this association with honor and
a little foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing to Kill Bill there. But also, like, you notice how all those weapons... those weapons you can see in, like, a zombie movie, too.
Well, it's also in this scene when he makes the decision not to run out on Wallace, to go back and save him. The katana kind of alludes to that he is, in the end, relatively honorable compared to the other characters in the film.
Yeah,
he didn't want to. He didn't want to throw the fight, really.
Right.
Well, and he also Rob Egger did a whole big analysis about the Gold Watch story and like analyzing it through the lens of a war film, and like how there are all kinds of little clues about this is like him kind of living out his father's or his POW kind of his legacy. It's like him living out that, carrying on the family tradition, even though he's not necessarily serving, but there's a lot of ties there. And especially that look on his face when he stands in front of all the license plates, because Tennessee is the volunteer state, which he also pointed out. But it's like he is making the choice to not leave a man behind, even if the man did try to kill him. But like he makes the choice to not leave a man behind.
Too, that not only is all of that mixed in there, but he's using a Japanese weapon to dispatch the dudes, and the whole thing was they were Japanese or Vietnamese POWs.
They were the Vietnamese, and the and there's also
that whole story about how the watch went through a couple asses, though, right? Or like at least through a couple of people before it got to the asses.
Well, and also, as far as that story, there was an allusion to this scene because, I can't remember the exact quote, but Walken's character, Captain Coons, does say that something along the lines of,
a man of Wanaki, a man he never met.
No. He says something about. You probably don't know this, and hopefully you'll never know or whatever. But he says something like, "When two men go through certain things together,
you take on certain responsibilities.
You take on certain responsibilities." And that's kind of where I think Butch is also feeling that he had a bit of a responsibility at this point. And then of course, yes, he goes back and. He frees Wallace by slicing the katana through Maynard. Wallace takes a gun and blows Zed off at the...
man, I'm pretty fucking far from okay.
Yeah.
Apparently, Tarantino's one of his favorite lines he's ever written is, "I'm gonna get medieval on your ass."
And that was a major... Of all the lines in this movie, I think that one hit the pop culture.
Dude, that whole scene right there is still legend to me.
But I mean,
he's pissed. You can tell Marcellus Wallace, he's standing there bare-assed with that fucking like dress shirt, like barely covering his butt cheeks, and he's holding that shotgun, and he's like, "I'm gonna have a couple hard pipe hitting N-words coming, go to work on this dude with pliers and a blowtorch. He's about to spend the rest of his very short life in agonizing fucking pain."
Right?
Ving Rhames
we talking
goes
hillbilly
hard.
boy.
I ain't throwing you by a damn sight.
Ving Rhames goes hard right there. Like you can believe that shit just happened,
right?
Because he's fucking pissed.
And great casting, because Ving Rhames, he wasn't even like a household name at the time,
and he wasn't at the top of the list. Actually, Sam Jackson was one of the people they suggested for the role, but they ended up going with Rhames, and he was great.
This is he's on fire in this role, especially in that moment. Like, holy crap, he really delivers his lines with conviction.
Right. So anyway, we really definitely need to get to the last part, because that'd be the last segment of the film, which is the Bonnie situation.
You have got to appreciate just how delicate this Bonnie situation is. She comes home and finds a bunch of gangsters in the kitchen doing a bunch of gangster shit. Ain't no telling what she's liable to do.
Well, before we do, so basically we circle back to the beginning where this dude, they didn't even know was there, was hiding in the bathroom. Again, bad thing in bathrooms. Yeah. And he comes out blasting his gun. And
when were you going to tell us that there was someone in the bathroom? That there was someone there with the fucking hand cannon?
Right. But the thing is, he fires off these 6 shots almost point blank, and not one of them lands. And of course, without missing a beat, Vince and Jules are just blow him away. Yeah. And then Jules looks around, and there's holes directly behind. Man. Yeah.
Well, that's what's so crazy about it, because I watched it relatively recently, and I've done it a couple times with this in mind. But like, if you look at where the bullet holes are relative to where they were standing, they 100% should be dead.
Yeah,
completely, and yet they are not.
Yeah, especially Joel's. Like a couple of them are dead center behind his chest, and he sees it as a miracle. And of course, the other one.
You gotta have an opinion.
That sparked a theological debate between him and
right.
Which, I mean, if that happened to me, you bet your ass I would be like,
I'm starting to believe in miracles.
Right. And then they take Marvin with them. They're going to deliver the case. And of course they're having that debate in the car. And meanwhile, Vincent pops.
You ever seen that show, Cops? Well, I was watching it the other day, and this guy unloaded on this guy, and he didn't fucking hit anything. Nothing happened. All right, it was just him and this guy.
Right.
It's freaky, but it happens. And he's like, Marvin, what do you make of all this? Man, I don't even have an opinion. That's Phil Lamar, by the way, underrated
Hermes. Yeah, and then but he accidentally unloads the gun right in Marvin's face.
Yeah,
I shot him in the face.
Which now I always if we buy the thesis of divine intervention, which I think relative to the where the bullet holes are and everything, I would have to say yes. That probably is a pretty darn good case for it. But if we're to buy that, and Tarantino has always kind of, if he's embraced religion at all, at least somewhat thematically, he's tended to kind of go for like kind of Old Testament God, very much eye for an eye kind of logic. Because what I always interpreted that scene to mean is that he saved Jules and Vincent, but saved Jules specifically. Jules took the right message from it, which is to say that there are forces in the world beyond one's own understanding or input, that something totally, like you said, God makes the impossible possible. Something like that can happen. Vincent doubts it, and what happens? Something else extraordinary happens, and it creates a problem, and an innocent gets sacrificed as a result of it, of his hubris.
I don't know how innocent he was, because Phil Lamar, if you could say that they knew that if they left him alive, he would grow up to become a bureaucrat, and that would be.
I say innocent, very with ginormous quotation marks, but in that instance, he didn't deserve to be shot in the face.
So basically, they don't have that many friendly places to go. So they go to his friend Jimmy's house, who's played by Quentin Tarantino. And this is also one of my gripes of the movie is that Tarantino is a hella director, and he has phenomenal taste in music, and he's a great writer. He is not an actor. He is not.
As fun as the scene is, he's the low point in the movie in terms of performances.
He could have done better.
I think he's all right. I mean, it's a very small part, and thankfully he gave himself a small part and not like a lead role.
Small part, yes, and he thankfully it's a character that's within his wheelhouse. It's just he could have taken a few of his lines of dialogue out, and we wouldn't have missed him all that much.
Yeah. I'll say this. Like, he's nowhere near as memorable in his own movie as, say, Scorsese was in Taxi Driver, because it's like you could, if you didn't know that was the director of the movie, then that scene would still work completely. But whereas with Pulp Fiction, like, part of that scene is like, oh, gee whiz, it's the director. He put himself in his own movie.
I think I see what you're saying. Scorsese's scene in Taxi Driver feels more like it's part of the overall sleaze of the movie, whereas this does feel like it's like a departure for a minute. Yeah, I get it.
It's a very Hitchcockian.
It feels like a cutesy self-insert cameo, as opposed to, say, like Scorsese really actually did cast himself well in that little bit part.
Well, he perfectly fits that dude. That's fucking totally insane.
But this one, again, we were kind of joking last week with Judge Dredd, with Max von Sydow, Sylvester Stallone, Rob Schneider. That's like and here you've got like the same basic thing. You've got Samuel L. Jackson, you got John Travolta, and you got Harvey Keitel. I think one of his better roles.
Yeah.
And it's just, one of these does not belong. I mean, but basically,
wait a minute. You trying to say that Harvey Keitel didn't belong in this shit? Have you seen Bad Lieutenant?
No.
Tarantino stuck out relative to those three.
Relative to those two, Tarantino.
If anything, fucking. Oh, okay. Because I was gonna say, if anything, relative to fucking everyone else, Harvey Keitel stuck out as being
he's
the
kind of
legitimate dude. And
he kind of no offense, John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson, but Harvey Keitel kind of towers over all of them
for a minute.
Well, he's playing the consummate professional. And he really comes across as
he's done it before.
Yes, exactly. It's like one of my favorite parts in the movie. Of course, two successive phone calls. You got Sam Jackson calling in a panic to Marcellus, and he tells him off on the phone. And then Marcellus just smoothly comes back with the exact same thing. I'm on it. I'm going to call the wolf, and he's going. Oh, you're calling the wolf?
You feel better,
motherfucker? Shit, that's all you had to say.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite
where he calls the wolf, and the wolf is writing down all this stuff, and he looks at his watch. It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
And it says 9 minutes and 37 seconds later, which that is honestly possibly my favorite non-famous line in the piece, because that says everything we need to know about Winston Wolfe.
And it looks like he's at like a funeral to begin with, like he's probably at some funeral. He had something.
I thought that was like a formal party or something.
Brandon, are you trying to say something?
I need to go ahead and say what's on for next week, because it looks like y'all are going to be going on for at least another 30 minutes, and so an hour past what on there, because y'all haven't covered everything from the diner scene or your favorites or music.
There's a lot.
Well, definitely go ahead and throw out your favorites before you sign off.
Yeah, I'm gonna get off too.
I mean, my favorites. Is pretty much the scene that y'all are talking about, I think. So I do like Jack Rabbit's. There's something about that place that's just kind of fun, and you want to hang out there.
I would totally go there.
And I wanted that steak and burger, and I guess as I get older, I'm like, why would you let that steak get cold? But you could dance after you eat the steak. As far as next week, we are covering movie collectors. They are their submissions, which were the two Tom Hanks roles. We have The Green Mile and Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, there you go.
So you all have an night, and
all right. Good night.
Actually, I'm going to be
Forrest, you're ready? Okay.
Yeah, well, I will say my favorite scene was Christopher Walken's monologue. For pretty much everything we discussed already.
I'll be damned if I'm, I can't say the rest of it. Unfortunately, we used to quote it all the time in high school, but nowadays it's fucking not good shit.
Right.
Especially with you present for us. I'm sorry, but it is fucking funny. You know what I mean? I love that part. Yeah. Fully agree with you.
Yep.
All right.
So favorite part as well. I'm gonna bounce out of here. Definitely check out the Pullman Madness on Drunken Master Studios. Got a lot of cool stuff coming up. Sorry to bail on you guys early, but I do have a kid that I gotta attend to.
Yeah, it's running really late.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good one.
Amazing discussion, man. I mean, we went hard with the Pulp Fiction,
Right.
and I think anybody that hasn't seen it needs to get out there and watch it immediately. Anybody who has needs to revisit it and figure out your favorite points. Yeah. So
okay.
Take care.
Take care. So we got to wrap it up, and I really do want to talk about the diner for at least a few minutes. So we'll go ahead, even though the whole wolf scene is great. I definitely. Yeah. So we flash back to the diner where we actually hear that initial. All right, this is robbery, but it's slightly different.
Fucking pricks, move, and I'll execute every motherfucker.
But she says something a little different this time because it's a viewpoint, and that was kind of cool. So basically, they start going around collecting wallets, threatening people, whatever. Meanwhile, Vega's in the bathroom, and Jules is. Actually, we did have that brief little dialogue. One of the lines I always remember, "Well, bacon tastes good."
Yeah, well, you forgot. So pretty please, with sugar on top. Clean the fucking car.
Yeah, there's that one. Clean the fucking vehicle, I think it was.
I'm a mushroom cloud laying motherfucker. Every time my fingers touch brain, I'm Superfly TNT.
Right.
I'm guns in the Navarone.
Right. So yeah, it was pretty good. So you get he comes around, he sees Jules, Jules throws his wallet in, and he is puzzled by this guy who's clearly unfazed by him. Mm-hmm. And he kind of hovers there with his gun in his face. And he's trying to threaten him. He's like, I can't remember exactly, but something like, I hate to disappoint you, but this isn't the first time I've had a gun in my face, and it's like, and then he just,
that whole thing is such a brilliant, Mexican standoff, basically.
Right.
Talk about
once Vincent comes back,
and I love how Samuel L. Jackson just brings it all home to him. It's kind of like, sit the fuck down, motherfucker.
Yeah. This is apparently the scene that nearly cost Sam Jackson the role and helped get it for him. Basically, he came in they wrote the role for him. And he came in thinking it was a read because he thought it was his role. And Paul Calderon, who does show up as the bartender, did such a good job. They almost gave it to him. But then Jules came back. Jackson came back and read it again. And they were like, okay, we got to do that. So basically, he gets the drop on Pumpkin and forces him to sit down at the table across from him. And basically, like you said, the sort of a Mexican standoff with Honey Bunny pointing at the gun at him, and then Vincent comes out and points a gun at her, and she freaks out. And then he's like, "No, back on!" He'll yell out, "Back on me, back on me!" And he sits there, and there's the part where he says, "Get my wallet out of the bag." Well, which one is it?
It's the one that says bad
motherfucker.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite line in the movie. And I believe that was actually Tarantino's wallet. And he actually says that on it. And so basically, but then he starts talking to Pumpkin. He's like, you take that money out of there, count it, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then and if Vincent says something like, if you give them that money, I'm just, he's like,
shoot him on general principle.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not giving you that money. I'm buying something from you. Want to know what I'm buying, Ringo? What? Your life. Yeah. And then he's like, you read the Bible? Not regularly. There's a passage I got memorized. Ezekiel 25:17.
And the funny part is that's not the actual verse.
It's not. No. But I do want to at least get that read once because that's such a great part of the film.
I know.
The path of the righteous man is beset on
all sides by the inequities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know that my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon you. Now, I've been saying that shit for years. Yeah, I thought it was never really thought about what it meant. I just thought it was some cold-blooded shit to say to someone before I popped a cap in his ass. Yeah.
So basically, it's a very slight different rendition, word-wise, but definitely his delivery is very different from when he said it to Brett before he popped the cap in his ass. But he goes into this long thing about how he's trying to figure out what it means. And it's a very interesting little speech. And apparently that version of Ezekiel 25:17 was actually drawn from an old Sonny Chiba movie.
That's right.
But you're right. The quote in the Bible, I actually looked for it and I was like, where is this quote? The actual 25:17 is similar to the last few lines of what he says, but it's different. But most of what he says
is nowhere near as long.
Yeah.
Nowhere near as long as that. But
it's about 4 lines.
Honestly, that whole speech he gives, that could probably be my favorite scene, just because, and again, it's, if I had to really think about it, it's not the funniest scene, but I think it's the most impactful, because like one of the things that I think you could rightfully accuse Tarantino of being is not terribly deep with a lot of his work. That's a notable exception, because again, like Jules goes through the biggest arc in the whole thing, because you really get the sense that something has awoken inside of him to where he is probably going to endeavor to become something of like a priest or a monk or something like that. But point is, like, something has awakened.
He says he's going to wander the earth like Cain.
What you mean walk the earth? You know, like Cain and Kung Fu. See, go places, meet people, get in adventures. Right. But so you decided to be a bum. But but honestly, that whole speech where he's like, the truth is, you're the weak and I'm the tyranny of evil men. But I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd. And it's like that whole thing, I was like, God damn, you know, he delivers that so well. It's no wonder why he got
that
the
was
Oscar
his Oscar
nomination.
speech.
Yeah, and, pretty much. You know,
I'm a little bit annoyed that Sam Jackson apparently has sour grapes over that. He did lose to Martin Landau and Ed Wood. And I'll admit, this is a more iconic role, but Landau did do a great job in Ed Wood.
He was fantastic. Well, that was like a transformative role, because it's like you don't see Martin Landau in there anymore. You see Bela Lugosi.
It was Bela Lugosi, exactly. But I admit, Jackson was quite great. And there's also a great callback. I didn't know about this. I never spotted it before. But now I want to go back and watch The Winter Soldier again. But apparently, when
Nick Fury's tombstone, it has the Ezekiel 25:17. It has the first little bit, the path of the righteous man. Which I saw that too, and I was like, oh, that's great.
Yes, I need to go see that again. But anywho, great little. Speaking of Disney, funny trivia. This was apparently the first movie Miramax released after Disney bought it.
Yeah,
very strange fit for Disney.
I know, and our feminist icon Harvey Weinstein, having helped to usher it into existence, you know, it was one of those. Apparently, this film and Tarantino, like Miramax, has been called, you know, the house that Quentin built, and you know, for good reason, because again, this really did kind of help to raise Miramax's profile.
Right. So I guess we definitely time for us to wrap up. But Dave, since you haven't put as much got as much time to talk overall, is there anything you really want to cover before we go into favorites and what have you?
Well, I just like a lot of the segments. I think I like the segment with Christopher Walken a lot, because it's like that a moment where it's like you're not quite on Earth anymore, and Christopher Walken in a uniform stating that this is my watch that that spent some time up a dude's ass. Okay.
Yeah.
And basically kind of giving you a backstory to Bruce Willis's character, which we later find out. And I think I like the whole like the pawn shop segment too, because then you got Bruce Willis's character going like, "Are we okay, man? Are we cool?" At the end there. So
that you and me. Let me tell you, there is no you and me.
You're right. And I guess the whole can I eat your cheeseburger? Now that's a really good cheeseburger. So there are definitely some very quotable things in here, like you said, and I get a kick out of the way that Vincent and Samuel Jackson end up like, having dialogue back and forth with each other, and it's cool,
I like the bit underrated bit there is like, tell me something. You think of all this stuff when you were just sitting there eating that muffin? Yeah, I was sitting here eating my muffin, drinking my coffee, and when I had what alcoholics refer to as a moment of clarity. Shift to be continued.
All right. So I guess, Dave, was that your favorites then, or that was your?
I think my favorites was the moment when they actually stuck that a syringe in Thurman's thing, and the one chick, which we see in the beginning and the end, she's kind of crazy, but she was like, "Hey, that was really cool,"
Oh yeah, Roseanne Arquette.
Yeah.
So that would have been my favorite. But I think my next favorite was the whole selection of weapons moment with Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I can go with this. Wait a minute. Oh, hell yeah. Let's go with this.
Yeah. I would say, in terms of like the deeper themes and dramatic weight and all that, that last bit with, I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd.
Right.
In terms of like funniest bit, I mean, that's like almost impossible. But like, I think if I had to, honestly, it's like the opening bit with the Royale with cheese. Like, it's like that to me is like up there with the Rebel blockade runner versus the Star Destroyer in A New Hope, as far as like something like that was a dramatic visual shot, but like that whole exchange is like the dialogue equivalent of like, as soon as that moment comes on the screen, you have the audience's attention, and it's like you've got them, and that's the dialogue equivalent of that, and it's pretty hard to top that as far as the comedic value of it. But cool. seriousness, it would be I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd.
Mm-hmm. So before I do mine, I want to do a couple of quick production shout outs. So we didn't really talk about, one being the production design and the makeup and all the costuming and everything was pretty on point. You got to talk about Sam Jackson's Jerry curl and Mia, Uma Thurman's little black wig there. Those were kind of iconic looks after the all was said and done. But I have to say again, probably my single favorite moment in terms of acting and dialogue was probably when Sam Jackson's like, "It's the one that says bad motherfucker." That was a good use of that word. And then the part where the wolf is like, "It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10." I just loved that. And I agree. That whole speech that Sam gives at the end was very impactful and good. But again, for me, one of the biggest things was the music cues. The music cues for Son of a Preacher Man, for Miserlou. And one that we didn't mention was Urge Overkill's Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon, which happens to be playing while Mia is snorting the heroin, which gives a very different flavor to what that song was probably originally intended to be. But it was very effective, I think.
We haven't mentioned the fact that the by the intercom. Where's the intercom? That whole thing, how that became a meme over 25 years later.
Oh, it's a very memeable movie, and a lot of stuff like that. Like one thing that I thought about mentioning was I don't know if you guys know crack.com, but they did like one photoplasty that was pretty funny. That was like movie quotes in inappropriate situations. I think that was the theme. And there was a picture of two people at their wedding, and they're exchanging rings. And the guy's saying, "I hid this uncomfortable piece of metal for 2 years." That was great.
That would be great.
But anyway, so are we ready? Has everyone said their piece?
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Still shorter than the movie itself, I think.
Just barely.
But anyway, cool. So I guess we can do our little outros.
Yep.
I guess Stain, then me, then I'll hand it to you, Dave.
Sure.
Dan Kyle, filmmaker, Inside Movies Galore person, and you can find me on Indie Horror Film Creative and No Money Film School, but I really, really, really need to revamp those. Just had some good bouts of fortunes lately, so now I'm going to try to get, filmmaking back under control.
All right, good deal. And I'm Kotobuki Jake. I'm co-host on Septum Sin versus the World, where we review what's coming out, what we have gotten recently. We do various other programs. Last week we did a discussion with Dave and Animes and Collections Roger on Steins Gate. We'll be doing our own awards program later in the season, and we'll be working on that as we go. It should be fun. And I think that's all I'm going to say tonight. So take it away, Dave.
And that's all I have to say about that. Yeah. Oh, wait, that's the wrong movie.
My name is David Strege. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore, where we talk about any film and every film inside the intergalactic universe of film and outside of film, for that matter. So, but I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I go on about my video pickups, video thoughts on films that I have picked up, and share what I know. So definitely go ahead and check that out. Like, share, and subscribe, and come back with us and listen with us next week as we continue our audience appreciation April themed month. So definitely some cool films coming up. What were they again?
It's The Green Mile and Saving Private Ryan.
Very cool Tom Hanks double feature. So stay tuned for some exciting journeys in film. So thank you. Have a great evening, morning, wherever you are, and hopefully you just click that button and give us a like, and let us know down in the comments what you thought of our discussion.
And if you can answer the question, do you know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in France?
Right.